Welcome everybody to this very special event in this very special venue. I was lucky enough to work in John's office for the past 5.5 years. We found lots of things in common. We grew up in Victoria, we love AFL, and we have a deep commitment to ending the public funding of private education.
John was someone who believed with all of his being that governments had a responsibility to invest in the public good. He was someone who believed very strongly in public education, public transport, public health. And he stood with the community time and time again against the privatisation of public services for profit and investment in the public good.
I've never seen anybody be able to crisscross from one side of the state to the other side of the state to visit so many TAFE colleges. I think John is honestly the hardest working politician in New South Wales today.
He was a man of very deep principle, and most of all, he had the courage of his convictions.
This government is positioning itself to do exactly what the previous government did, and that is to privatise the profits and socialise the risks, liabilities and costs.
So on behalf of the Australian Greens, I just want to say to John, thanks for your service to our movement. Thanks for your service to the New South Wales Parliament. Thank you for your service to the nation. You will be greatly missed.
Well, John was a political animal since childhood. He was regularly thumping the breakfast table with outrage at what was in the newspapers, beckoning his hapless family to join him in his fury over a bowl of cornflakes. To say that John excelled at university would be a gross understatement. His performance was stellar. When he gladly accepted a scholarship to do a PhD at the University of California, Berkeley in electrical engineering, was it that specific discipline that he was responding to? Or was it the history of student politics at that particular campus that was the real draw card? In those days, John kept discussion of his work with people outside his discipline to a minimum because it quickly became unfathomable to everyone. But he could talk on any topic with flair and humour to keep everyone amused, as he did with all of you in different contexts in New South Wales. He was a people-focused workaholic, even as an academic. He would give colleagues and graduate students hours of help during the day and stay late into the night to do his own work. Various levels of government regularly wanted his opinion on questions of state system energy supply. He was passionate about renewable energy and improving the performance of the grid. He would spend many, many hours researching and verifying a report that he was writing. We all know about his passion for quality control and getting things right before publication of any idea. Each time he would eagerly submit his answer to the question at hand. Each time the government would shelve his report and decide their policy direction opposite to that argued by John. Thank you everybody so much for coming. It's fantastic to see.
Now, the ETU knew it was in for one heck of a fight. And we went looking for mates. We went knocking on doors in Parliament House. We couldn't get any mates. But we did happen upon one particular gentleman that gave us everything he had. And that was your guy, John Kaye. We had a delegates conference of all our power industry delegates one Saturday and asked John to come along. John wouldn't take his seat up with all the important, or so they thought, important people. He sat with the delegates. I'm talking about delegates of ours from the bush who aren't necessarily green. John and those guys talk the same language about the electricity industry in New South Wales. And I had someone tell me that you're never really a comrade until you fought in the trenches with someone else. John fought in the trenches with us. He's a comrade of the ETU, no doubt about it.
I'm not one to eulogise, and perfection does not come with death. I work closely with John, and I know at times he had very strong opinions. Some would describe him as stubborn at times. But I also saw an amazing intellectual rigour in everything that he approached. and he had a very open mind and a deep commitment to involving people. What I've seen since John got very sick, and certainly since he died, is hearing stories from many people, particularly many of the younger members of the Greens, talking about how deeply he can encourage them to become involved, his interest in their work, his support for their activities, and his keenness that they were involved in public life, not just in the Greens, but in our democratic processes that he believed in with such passion. We do miss him enormously. We've lost a great supporter for public education, and I did particularly want to pay tribute to that because it's one area I work very closely with John. And it's an issue that he took forward, doing amazing work on TAFE, on public schools, on public universities. And the fact that the Greens have such strong policies in all these areas is a tribute to many people, but particularly to John Kaye.
In education, we come across many advocates for this or that. John, however, had that passion, combined it with a marvellous intellect and insight into how schools work, but what a strong public education system means for all of us. His advocacy and communication was powerful, not only for its great depth, but for his belief that to succeed he had to convince and carry people with him. His lasting message regarding public education: it is the obligation of the government to ensure that every child can dream to be what they want to be, regardless of the circumstances of their families. And that continued through his strident campaigning for Gonski, along with many others. And Gonski will be victorious.
He understood the deep and abiding importance of TAFE to people and to communities. When we walked into public meetings, I reckon most of the people had come to hear John, and I'm certain he knew pretty much everyone in New South Wales. It was almost impossible to prize him free at the end. Thanks for everything, Joe Kaye. We miss you so much.
John was a forerunner before the recent live baiting greyhound exposés. He was looking into the greyhound industry. The more he looked into this industry, the more he came to the conclusion that this industry must be banned. And that's what John was working on. John also was one of the first people, indeed, to speak about the dark side of the so-called glamorous Melbourne Cup. He was one of the few people to speak out against horse racing. And he and Lauren arranged protests in Martin Place to talk about the cruelty of this race. He was just an amazing man, and he believed that we don't have a quota on compassion, that we all of us have within us enough love and compassion to extend to the environment, to human beings, and to animals. We can care about all of it just as he did. And we do miss you, John Kaye.
John's approach to life was, in his words, evidence-based. Our brother Stephen has remarked that John would have been a good lawyer. Like our father, John worked hard for justice and equality in Australia. In Judaism, we call this tikkun olam, repairing the world. Unconsciously and by example, John showed us how to tread softly on the earth.
I remember more than one occasion during my time working with John, usually we had suffered a major setback. John and I would talk about the point of it all and how we were going to keep going. When I expressed this to John, he would look at me and say that he had no doubt the world was a better place because we were doing what we were doing. He kept us going. He apologised for the quality of his work, saying that the medication was making him incoherent. I told him that John Kaye at 50% capacity is more intelligent than any other member of Parliament on a good day.
I think it's fair to say that John Kaye was one of those extremely rare people in politics, fundamentally loyal, fundamentally principled. John wouldn't stand beside you when you were being attacked. He wouldn't. He would stand in front of you. That's John Kaye. John came to the conclusion, well before I met him, It's public education that is the fundamental social glue that binds our country together, that binds any nation together. And that's why you can see shot after shot after shot of John out the front of every single TAFE campus in New South Wales, every single one of them. It was the day before he died, we were talking about his tombstone, and he said he'd really like hashtag save TAFE on it somewhere. So, after he died, you get humbling experiences as an MP. And it was a series of colleagues and workers in the Parliament who pulled me over to one side and said, David, I'm so sorry about John's loss. I mean, he was a wonderful man, and I just want you to know he was my favourite Greens MP. Well, he was mine too. He was a very, very dear friend, a fabulous colleague, and like all of you, I miss him dearly. Thank you.
The future is many things and many possibilities. I know that each and every one of you is committed to the Greens and committed to the idea that we can write a future that is profoundly fair and is profoundly sustainable. I know that, and that gives me great comfort as I face my last, because I know that the work that's been done over the last 30 years of the Greens, longer, that work will not cease. That work will go on, and that work will always be there. There will always be a spark in any decent society. There will always be a spark that says it doesn't have to be this way. We can change it. Thank you, each and every one of you, for the work you did with me, for the help you gave me, for the ideas and the education you provided to me. There are people who will hear this who had profound impacts on my life. Impacts not just on how I viewed politics and how I viewed the role of the Greens, but impacts on the skills and impacts on the understandings that I brought to politics. I particularly thank those people, and I've thanked their patience. I don't think I was a very good learner. Early on, but I think I got better as I went along. Friends, colleagues, comrades, keep up the struggle. Love you all.
When the union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run, there can be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. Yet what force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one? But the union makes us strong.
The most satisfying part of my job has been working with communities and Greens members. There's nothing that comes close to the feeling of winning a campaign for a local community after you've worked with them, you've given them a voice, and you've seen them grow politically.